Welcome. Tonight, we journey into two of the most unsettling abduction accounts ever recorded. Stories separated by thousands of miles, but bound together by the same chilling mystery. First, the quiet farmlands of Queensland, Australia in 2001, where the Gundiah Mackay Abduction left a family shaken and forever changed. And then the extraordinary claims of Clayton and Donna, a couple who allege a lifetime of repeated abductions, encounters, and unimaginable experiences. Two encounters, two mysteries, one question that still haunts us. What really happened? It was the night of October 21, 2001, when a quiet stretch of rural Queensland, Australia, became the backdrop for one of the most widely discussed abduction cases in the country's modern history. The small community of Gundiah, located in the Fraser Coast region, was mostly farmland and scattered residences, with open pastures broken up by stands of gum trees and the occasional line of windbreaks. The nearest main road ran past paddocks and bushland, and once the last light faded, the area settled into a darkness broken only by the stars and the distant glow from farmhouses set far apart. It was the sort of night where a dog's bark could carry a long way, and a single porch light seemed bright against the surrounding black. On that property outside Gundiah, a modest farmhouse sat back from the road, with a small yard and a view across low fields. The house was simple and plain, a front room used as a living area, a kitchen tucked to the side, a short hall to the bedroom, and a window in the living room that looked out over the yard. Inside, the furnishings were practical and familiar: an upholstered couch, two chairs, a low table, a cabinet with a small television on top. It was the kind of interior that told its own story of everyday life. A blanket folded over the back of the couch, a pair of shoes near the door, a few magazines on the table, and the faint smell of dust and fabric warmed by the day. That evening, three people shared the space. Amy Rylands was stretched out on the couch with a blanket over her legs, somewhere between wakefulness and sleep. Her husband, Keith, had retired early to the bedroom to read and then switch off the light. Their friend, Petra Heller, remained in the living room with the television on, the set's quiet hum and changing light keeping her company. Outside, the night air was calm. There was no wind to rattle the leaves, no cars passing along the nearby route, and no other human sounds beyond the house. The living room itself felt encased in that stillness. The television provided most of the illumination, blue-white tones spilling across the floor and up the wall. Shadows pooled around the furniture. Every now and then the glow on the screen shifted with the program, but the sound stayed steady at a low volume. Petra sat angled toward the set, her eyes drifting between the picture and the window, where the curtain was partly drawn back. It was an unremarkable late hour in a place where late hours were usually unremarkable. What drew Petra's attention was not a loud noise, but a change in the way the room was lit. She noticed a pale illumination on the wall that did not match the television's rhythm or color. At first, she thought a vehicle might be edging along the drive with its headlights sweeping across the side of the house, but the direction of the glow seemed wrong for that. The beam did not arc or fan like normal headlights. Instead, it presented as a sharply edged rectangle that slid into the room as if it had been aimed and placed. Her gaze fixed on the window. Through the glass and the parted curtain, the source of light remained indistinct, but its shape and clarity were unmistakable. It moved with deliberation, crossing the floor in a smooth line until it reached the couch where Amy lay beneath her blanket. As the beam enveloped the couch, Amy's body rose from the cushions in a perfectly horizontal position, as though lifted from below by unseen support. Her arms remained by her sides beneath the blanket. Her face appeared calm and unresponsive, with no sign that she roused as the motion began. Petra's reaction was immediate. She called out for Keith, and the quiet house answered with his footsteps coming quickly down the hall. By the time he reached the living room, Petra was pointing toward the window, urging him to look outside. Together, they saw the beam extending through the opening and out into the yard. Beyond the line of the window, set just past the side of the house, hovered a large, disc-shaped object. It reflected the ambient night as metal does, smooth and dark, with a faint sheen, and it made no sound that either of them could hear. From the underside of the object, the same bluish-white glow connected down to the window, and within that connection, Amy's figure moved steadily outward. The motion showed no pauses or jolts. There was no struggle, no apparent friction with the frame, and no contact that either witness could see. She passed through the opening with the same even speed with which she had risen from the couch. The beam drew her away from the house by degrees, lifting her body toward the craft above. Seconds piled on seconds. The beam seemed to narrow or retract as it brought her closer to the underside of the object. Then, abruptly, both the beam and Amy's form were no longer visible. The disc rose slightly, tipped to one side, and moved away at startling speed. It did not bank like an aircraft, and it did not roar or whine as it accelerated. It simply shifted and was gone, leaving behind the ordinary darkness of the yard. The span from Petra's first glimpse of the beam to the craft's disappearance lasted less than a minute. Petra and Keith stood for a few seconds, taking in the empty couch and the open window. They decided first to search the immediate area. With flashlights in hand, they stepped into the yard and scanned the ground for any sign of Amy. The beam had looked as though it connected to the patch of lawn just beyond the window, and they checked there, then expanded their search outward. They walked the edge of the yard, the short length of driveway, and a bit of the road in front of the house. They called her name and listened for any reply. The night offered only its usual distant noises. After several minutes, they returned to the house and called the local police to report that a person had gone missing under unusual circumstances. Officers arrived and began by asking the standard questions: who was present, when the missing person was last seen, whether there had been any prior argument or reason for the person to leave, whether doors were locked or windows were open. Petra and Keith relayed what they had witnessed: the beam, the levitation, the silent disc outside the window, the speed of the departure. The officers noted their visible stress and the specificity of their description. In the early hours that followed, while statements were taken and the house settled again, a call reached the local station from far to the north. Police in Mackay, a coastal city more than 790 kilometers away by road, reported that a woman matching Amy Rylance's description had been found at a service station there. She was barefoot and appeared disoriented, and she was wearing the same clothes she had last been seen in at the farmhouse. Staff at the service station had called for assistance after she approached them and asked for help, saying she did not know how she had arrived at that location. When officers in Mackay spoke to her, she gave her name and said that her last clear memory was of lying on a couch in the living room back in Gundiah. The next thing she recalled was waking in a room that did not resemble any room she knew. The space was uniformly lit without visible lamps or fixtures, and the surfaces, walls, ceiling, and whatever structures surrounded her were smooth and unbroken. She found herself on a flat surface that felt like a table or a platform. The air felt cool and the environment quiet. She reported that figures were present in that room. They were human-like in outline, but taller than average, with elongated facial features and large eyes. Their clothing fit close to the body and did not show seams or fastenings. She did not describe hearing them speak, but she understood that she was being told to remain calm and that she would not be harmed. The sense of communication, as she related, did not come through the normal channels of speech. She remembered feeling weak, as if she had just woken from a deep sleep, and she remembered being examined in a way that did not cause her pain. At some later point, she lost consciousness again. When she awoke, she was lying on grass near a road at night. Above her hung the same disc-shaped object she had glimpsed from the farmhouse, or something identical to it, its underside faintly luminous. Within moments, without sound, it moved away upward and was gone. She then walked toward the nearest visible light, which turned out to be the service station that contacted police. Back in Gundiah, officers relayed the information and began the process of confirming identity and coordinating between stations. The distance involved underscored the strangeness of the report. By ordinary means, the trip from the farmhouse near Gundiah to Mackay requires many hours of driving along long sections of the Bruce Highway and connecting roads. Walking that distance inside the time frame available was impossible. There were no reports on the highway from that night linking a person matching Amy's description to any vehicle or rest area. There were no records that she had boarded public transport or arranged a ride. As the immediate crisis subsided, Amy was safe, though confused. The focus turned to documenting what could be documented. Over the next days, Amy, Keith, and Petra were interviewed separately by police and by civilian researchers who cataloged unusual aerial phenomena. Investigators who examined the farmhouse made note of physical details. On the interior, near the window, they observed slight scorching on the sill and a faint discoloration on the adjacent wall that did not match ordinary wear. Outside, directly beneath the path the beam appeared to have taken, a patch of grass showed flattening and a difference in color compared with the surrounding area. Samples of soil and vegetation were collected for possible analysis. Whether those samples were later tested, and if so, what results they produced, was not made public. Medical evaluation of Amy in Mackay documented her condition in straightforward terms. She showed signs of mild dehydration and fatigue, which fit the description of walking to the service station and the stress of the night. She had no injuries consistent with assault, restraint, or fall.
doctors noted faint reddening in certain areas of skin without an immediately obvious cause. Blood tests were largely normal, apart from a minor electrolyte imbalance that was corrected. No findings pointed to intoxication or illness. As news of the case spread beyond the immediate jurisdictions, the incident began to appear in regional and national media. UFO Research Queensland and other civilian research groups documented the case in their files, adding interview notes and summaries of the physical observations to their archives. The focus of these groups, as with the police, was to record what witnesses said and what could be seen or measured. Their reports emphasized the consistency of the accounts and the absence of ordinary explanations that could be verified. They also documented the limits of the evidence available. Photographs of slight scorching and flattened grass could show what something looked like after the event, but they could not assign a cause with certainty. As time passed, the Gundiah Mackay case settled into a place within Australian discussions of unusual encounters. It is cited because the witnesses' descriptions remained stable across interviews, and because investigators recorded physical observations at the site. It is cited because, after the press attention faded, the people involved did not produce new, shifting claims. They kept to what they had said from the start. For the farmhouse itself, life moved on. At some point, the occupants changed. The room where the television once cast its nightly glow returned to ordinary use under different hands. The window that looked over the yard once again reflected only the interior at night and the grasses outside by day. The yard grew and was cut, and the patch of discolored grass became indistinguishable from the rest. The house returned to the kind of place where a normal evening is just a normal evening.
In the quiet sprawl of Texas, where highways stretch endlessly across flat land and neighborhoods sit apart with long shadows at dusk, one couple has come to embody one of the most unsettling modern accounts of alien abduction in the United States. Clayton and Donna, a married couple from Houston, never sought notoriety or the weight of extraordinary claims. Yet, over the course of their lives, they became unwilling participants in experiences that defied conventional explanation. Encounters that seemed to follow them no matter where they lived, shaping their marriage and their understanding of reality itself. What began with fragmented memories and unexplainable fears evolved into a haunting story of repeated abductions, encounters that Clayton and Donna came to describe as ongoing, persistent, and deeply invasive. According to their accounts, the abductions began long before they met one another. Clayton recalled that as a child in the 1960s, he would wake in the middle of the night, paralyzed, unable to cry out for help, his room filled with a strange presence. He described luminous beings surrounding his bed, their forms tall and lean, with large dark eyes that seemed to pierce through him without emotion. These memories were fragmented, pieces of nights he tried to dismiss as nightmares, yet they carried a texture that dreams never quite held. For years he lived with the lingering dread of waking in the dark, aware of something watching, something that could not be explained away by childhood imagination. Donna's experiences were equally chilling. She remembered as a young girl lying in bed and hearing a humming noise, low and mechanical, that would fill her room until the walls themselves seemed to vibrate. Bright light would spill across the curtains, though the street outside was empty. In those moments, she recalled floating upward, her body weight weightless, drawn toward a light she could not resist. The next thing she would remember was waking in her bed hours later with the memory of staring into enormous eyes, cold and unblinking. As she grew older, she suppressed these memories, folding them into the category of night terrors or childish fear. But the sensation of being taken, of being observed, never fully left her. When Clayton and Donna eventually met and married, neither expected that the other carried such a burden of experiences. It was only years into their relationship that the memories began to resurface with startling clarity. Donna would wake screaming, recalling a figure standing in the corner of the bedroom, its outline sharp in the pale glow of the moonlight through the window. Clayton would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, convinced he had just been returned from somewhere else, his body sore, his memory fractured, and his mind filled with images of sterile rooms and non-human faces. When they began to share their recollections with each other, they realized the uncanny overlap in their experiences. Both described the same beings, the same sensations of paralysis, the same intrusive examinations. It was as though their lives had been woven into the same pattern long before they knew one another. The couple began to seek help from researchers who specialized in abduction accounts. Hypnosis sessions brought forth even more unsettling details, fragments of memories they had buried or could not otherwise access. Under regression, Clayton described being aboard a craft, lying on a flat metallic surface, while beings surrounded him, probing and examining. He recalled sharp instruments and a sensation of cold detachment from those who performed the procedures. Donna sessions revealed similar scenes, being laid out under harsh white light, surrounded by beings who communicated directly into her mind. She spoke of feeling stripped of privacy and control, reduced to little more than a subject of study. What haunted her most was the recurring sense that something was being done to her reproductive system, as though she were part of an experiment that had little regard for her as a person. As the years went on, the experiences did not fade, they intensified. The couple claimed that abductions would occur at unpredictable intervals, often preceded by strange atmospheric disturbances, bright lights outside their home, electronics malfunctioning, or a pervasive sense of dread that settled over them hours before the event. Donna described being taken while fully awake, pulled from her bed or even from her car, with Clayton sometimes witnessing her vanish before his eyes. There were times when both were taken together, their experiences overlapping so closely that they were able to corroborate details afterward. Each time, they returned shaken, confused, and marked by the same emptiness in their memory, punctuated by flashes of impossible scenes. Their relationship, already tested by the weight of ordinary life, began to bend under the strain of the extraordinary. They struggled to explain their experiences to friends or family, who often dismissed their accounts as fantasy or delusion. Yet the Lees maintained that what they endured was real as any other moment of their lives. They pointed to the consistency of their memories, the physical marks they sometimes found on their bodies, strange bruises, scoop-like scars, or reddened skin that appeared overnight without explanation. They pointed to the emotional toll, the sleepless nights, the panic that would overtake them without warning. For them,
disbelief from others did not erase the reality they shared. What set their case apart was the ongoing nature of the encounters. Unlike many abduction reports that center on a single event or a cluster of incidents, Clayton and Donna's experiences seemed to stretch across decades, continuing into the present. They described the beings not as occasional intruders, but as a constant presence in their lives, watching, waiting, and intervening at will. At times, the Lees described the beings in familiar terms: tall grays with elongated heads and enormous eyes, their skin smooth and almost translucent, their movements deliberate and precise. At other times, they recalled figures that seemed more human-like, though uncanny in their perfection, beings whose presence carried authority, as though they were supervisors overseeing the others. The couple spoke of feeling small and powerless in their presence, as though whatever intelligence guided these encounters was far beyond human capability. The psychological toll was undeniable. Donna, in particular, spoke of living with constant fear, never knowing when the next abduction might occur. Clayton, while more resigned, admitted to a sense of helplessness that ate away at him. Together, they lived in a state of hypervigilance, attuned to every flicker of light outside their windows, every sudden malfunction of an appliance, every dream that felt too vivid to just be a dream. And yet, despite the fear and exhaustion, they continued to speak publicly about their experiences, driven by the belief that others needed to know what was happening, not just to them, but to countless others who remained silent.
Researchers who examined the case noted the sincerity of the couple, their consistency across interviews, and the depth of emotion that accompanied their testimony. While skeptics pointed to psychological explanations, sleep paralysis, or shared delusions, those who spent time with the Lees often came away convinced that they were describing something beyond fabrication. The detail, the longevity of the experiences, and the fact that both partners corroborated one another created a body of testimony that was difficult to dismiss outright. Whether or not one believed in alien abductions, the Lees' account stood as one of the most unsettling and persistent cases on record. In their later years, Clayton and Donna Lee continued to report experiences, though the intensity sometimes shifted. There were periods of relative calm when months would pass without incident, followed by sudden waves of activity that left them shaken all over again. They described being marked not just physically, but emotionally, living with a knowledge that separated them from ordinary life. They were, in their own words, prisoners of an experience that offered no closure, no answers, and no escape. For them, the abductions were not a story from the past, but an ongoing reality, one that shaped every day of their lives. Their case remains controversial, as all such cases do. Yet, in the catalog of abduction phenomena, the Clayton and Donna Lee story stands out for its persistence, its corroborated detail, and its haunting reminder that for some, the mystery does not end with a single night of missing time. For the Lees, it is a lifetime of intrusion, an unending series of encounters that refuse to release them. And as they continue to speak of what they endure, their voices echo into the broader mystery of alien abduction, a mystery that remains as unsolved and as unnerving as ever. From the still farmland of Gundiah to the quiet suburban nights in Texas, two stories emerged that challenge the boundary between ordinary life and the unknown.
Amy Rylance's sudden disappearance and reappearance across hundreds of kilometers, and Clayton and Donna Lee's long struggle with uninvited watchers in the dark. Different times, different continents, yet the same unnerving pattern. People taken, examined, and returned with memories that defy explanation. As we close tonight, remember, these are not just stories, but testimonies, documented and retold for you to consider. End of transmission.